Hey everyone, Ethan Ater here with Horizon Hobby, and I'm here with Miguel. He's basically the mastermind behind the Synapse and also the AS3X Plus algorithm that's now in the Spektrum AS3X Plus receivers. And in this video, we are essentially going to be going over the basic setup process and also the initial flight tuning of AS3X Plus in a 3D airplane. So here we have a 67-inch Extra 260. We got a fresh AS3X Plus receiver in here. We've already set up all of the servo throws. We got our expo set up, sub trim, everything that we need to set up before we actually set the AS3X Plus receiver settings. And yeah, essentially we're just going to be going into forward programming, basically doing a first time setup on the AS3X Plus, and then pretty much just doing an initial tune flight.
So just to reiterate on that, before doing this first time setup, it is really important to have all those travel settings and everything set up. Make sure you fly it. You can do all the maneuvers you want, because once you do that first time setting, all those gyro settings you set are based on all those travel ranges and everything. So if you change that later on and you do a relearn, your gains might get affected and everything. So it is really important that the plane is set up the way you want it for flying before you do this part.
For sure. Yeah, going into the forward programming, you can see essentially AS3X Plus has not been set up on this receiver, because going in the gyro settings, you immediately see the first time setup here. So we can go ahead and just start the first time setup.
And this warning is going to tell you all that. Make sure it's set up, ready to fly. So yeah, we can just go through that.
Going to next, it's just reiterating any wing or tail type, channel assignment, etc. will require another initial setup, basically. So going through next.
So now we're going to do orientation setup. On this one, we'll just do it manual, or actually let's do it automatically, just to show that. So
it's a smaller,
if you're going to do it manually, you would just do the set orientation manually, but here we set it level and continue. And then we'll point it face down. I'm just going to lift it to not scratch the nose, and then go ahead and continue there.
There we go.
And then
as you can see, the orientation is correct.
Yeah, so this is the orientation in relation to the plane.
And it knows it's position 5.
So yeah.
Which realistically, if you set it up manually, you can just change the position manually. So,
but it's always good to double check that what it auto detects is what you actually have set up.
Yeah. All right, the next thing to do is just going to be gain channel select, and typically a lot of people like to do it on this dial right here. So that's
I have it on the trimmer.
You got it on the trimmer? Gotcha.
I just feel like it's a little bit more fine-tunable. If you don't capture your gains after a flight, then you don't end up with your knob somewhere else. It'll be wherever you left it off.
Gotcha.
So we could do this and just move the trimmer here. There, it's on aux 8. So it's already been assigned. Nice. It's an analog trim. If you do the digital trim, it's only going to give you plus and minus 30. The analog will give you the full plus and minus 100. So.
Nice.
But if you don't like that, of course, you can use the knob or slider, whatever suits you.
For sure. All right, so we got the gain channel assigned. We'll go next. We'll pretty much just hit apply.
Yep. And we could do a quick orientation check.
Yeah, for sure.
So go ahead and connect again.
Alrighty.
So let's go to gyro settings, system setup, utilities, and gyro response test.
Yeah, this is a really helpful feature.
So here, you just have a little bit of movement. You can see moving the tail up.
Yeah.
Elevators compensating, pitch plane up. Go ahead and roll it.
Yep, that's right. It wants to correct.
And we have rudder. And that looks correct. Nice. That's just a quick, easy way to make sure. That verifies that basically your orientation was set up correctly, and that your transmitter settings are also set up correctly for the wing type, reversing, etc.
That's a really helpful feature for sure. Because especially too, like on an airplane like this that might have lower gains, it's hard to see if it is making a correction. So that's a good way to verify.
Just makes it easy to see. Yep.
Alrighty. And there's a couple of things that we recommend as far as a first-time blanket settings for AS3X Plus on a 3D plane. I don't know if you want to go through those real quick.
And this is, just to clarify, this is specific to 3D plane where you're actually doing like high-energy maneuvers, right? If you're setting up a plane like this and you're just going to fly it like, you know, slow scale or what's the word? Like
more pattern.
Yeah, more pattern. Yeah. Then this does not apply to you. But if you do want to fly at 3D, if you're used to, for example, flying without a gyro 3D planes, some of these settings might help that feel a bit more natural while also still having a gyro response for turbulence and things like that.
Yeah, definitely. Because those, I would say, stock AS3X Plus settings would be good if, like you said, you were you know, flying a 3D plane, but the rates were super low. Like you don't have a whole lot of travel on all the surfaces.
Yeah.
But if you are, you know, utilizing that full throw that 3D airplanes provide, these settings definitely help. So
let's start with, so we'll go back to gyro settings, AS3X settings. And we'll start with priority since it's the first one on the list. So on this one, the default is 140. We're going to set this higher at 180. The reason is this helps get rid of your gain quicker as you move the stick. And especially on 3D planes where you have really high expo, the receiver doesn't see those stick inputs as much, even if you're putting a lot of input. So you can compensate for that expo by putting a lot of priority. If you're not using a lot of expo, then you might want to leave the default. But this would be like, if you have 50% plus expo, I recommend setting those high.
For sure, for sure.
So that would be the first setting for 3D planes.
Sounds good. So we got the priority set to 180.
The next is specific to AS3X Plus. It would be the stop release rate. So we'll go into that. And then this will be on the next page.
So go in next.
And we're just going to set this to 100 on all of them.
Alrighty.
And this basically just controls how your gain releases as you apply a stick input. And 3D planes, when you apply like a fast input, they rotate really fast. And this is going to basically have some delay on the gyro affecting that. So it's actually going to counteract your immediate input.
Gotcha.
So by setting it to 100, we're just not intervening with the user input as much.
That makes sense. Alrighty. And then the last thing would be the gain sensitivity.
Yeah. So because 3D planes are so sensitive and they have such wide travels, we usually want our gain window is going to be in a lower area than your typical planes. And so for this, we'll just set the gain sensitivity down to 0.5.
Alrighty.
You might find that 0.25 is also good for your plane, but this is just starting off. We're just going to go with this. And this just means that when you start going up on your gain, you don't instantly hit your max gain without much input.
Yeah, especially like you said, those numbers will be a lot more sensitive, changing them if the gain sensitivity is higher. So yeah, it's definitely good with an airplane with huge surfaces like this, just to start out with, you know, half the sensitivity. So that's pretty much
it for the blanket 3D settings. So we can go ahead and do a flight real quick, do that gyro gain tuning.
Alrighty.
And then we're going to go over some other settings that you might want to fine tune depending on your preferences, whether you're someone coming from 3D where you've never used gyros before, or you're new to 3D and you want the gyro to help you a little bit in some areas.
Sounds good.
All right.
Alrighty, let's get this thing in the air.
Yep.
So like we said before, we're going to be taking off with absolutely zero gyro gain. It's a good practice too, especially if something we incorrectly set up, if the gyro was reversed or anything like that, taking off with zero. I feel like it's better to have an airplane without a gyro than an airplane with a gyro fighting you.
Exactly, especially if something is set up wrong or just the default gain is too high, you're going to lose control of the plane. So yeah, we'll just start up with this and we'll work our way up to a gain that feels good.
Sweet. Alrighty, so the plane's all natural here. I'm gonna go ahead and just do a couple laps and then start feeding the gain in.
So we'll start doing rocking left and right as we're increasing the gain, see if we get any bounces. And if not, we'll just keep going up until we find those bounces.
Yeah.
There is an advanced way of setting up the stop block with your gain to fine tune both of them, but here we're just doing a basic gain setup while leaving stop block at default. So we're just gonna look for those bounces here as we increase that gain.
Still feels pretty good. I might feed in a little bit more.
Starting to see a little bit of bounce.
Yeah, I think I'm seeing just a little bit.
We can go up a little more, see how bad it gets, and then back off from that.
Alrighty. Max it out a good amount. Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah, so about a single bounce there. Yeah, we can back off a little bit off of that, and we should be good for our overall gain. Now this is also setting gains for all three of your axes, roll, pitch, and yaw. The default ratio in the system should be pretty good for most models. If you run into bounces on pitch or yaw before roll, then you can just go into your AS3X settings and reduce those a little bit. But most of the times you're not going to run into that. And just doing a basic tune like this on all three axes is just quick and easy, gets you most of the way of where you need without doing any fine tuning. So now we have the game where we want it. We're pretty much good to go for flying.
Yeah.
So Ethan can try doing all the maneuvers he might normally do, make sure the gyro's not interfering with his setup. And again, those settings we mentioned earlier are going to help a bit with making sure the gyro is not fighting you on your maneuvers.
Yeah, it's still out of just that initial tune, it still feels pretty locked in. And again, I think one of the big things with 3D is just, you know, a lot of people think that the gyro interferes with maneuvers that carry momentum, such as like this pop top. But as you can see, it's wanting to carry momentum very well.
Right. And part of those priority settings we adjusted are to make sure that your stick inputs carry a lot more priority. I mean, that's what it is. It's giving your stick inputs priority over the gyro, so the gyro backs off quicker when you're applying those inputs.
Right.
It lets the plane do what you're telling it to do.
For sure. Yeah, I was about to say, that feels pretty good right here. I don't feel much interference, if any.
Time remaining 2 minutes.
Well, I think that's pretty good.
Yeah.
If you want to land and we can go over some other settings, I would say this is a good setup for someone that's maybe new to 3D, but we can go over some stuff that people that are used to 3D without a gyro that they might want to set
Throttle cut on.
to get like a more natural feel to the airframe rather than the gyro itself.
Right. Sounds good.
Butter.
That AS3X Plus helping me out right there. Keeping it locked in for sure.
Awesome.
And again, it feels really locked in, precise. It stops really good. We back down off the gain so we wouldn't get that gyro bounce.
Yeah.
And again, you can just whip the stick super fast and it doesn't feel like the gyro's holding the airplane back from carrying momentum. So
one quick note on backing the gain off, because in a lot of our marketing videos, we've mentioned, oh, you don't have to back off the gain anymore. You could get it right to you where you want it. The stop lock rate actually hides some of that extra gain you have. So when we're hitting bounce here with the default stop lock, that's already higher than what you would have gotten before. And when we back off, we're actually ending up at the gain that we would have been without stop lock, if that makes sense. So like without stop lock, you would get bounces with what you have right now. Right? But now with stop lock, what you backed off into is just kind of, you still have more gain than what you would have had before.
gotcha. Nice. Well, that's
Just for people not to think we're contradicting what we said before with the AS3X, you don't have to back off of it. With the default stop lock, you do back off of it, but that's technically already more than what you had before.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Alrighty. Yeah, we'll go ahead and go into full programming right here.
So for people that are used to flying 3D planes without a gyro, one thing you can do, we'll go to gyro settings and AS3X settings, and in your stop lock release rate, these defaults are actually somewhat conservative, and it's so this is already a bit more on the natural side to what the airframe would do when it stops.
Gotcha.
You can go lower with these values, and that'll basically let the plane stop more naturally and not use the gyro as much. The lower you go, the less it's using the gyro. Gotcha. So for example, we can maybe go down to like 10, and if you want, you can demonstrate like a snap roll or something. Or what was the one you were doing?
Yeah, we can do just a series of snaps, because I remember whenever we were playing with this earlier, whenever I would do a snap on a lower stop lock rate, the airplane would feel more natural, like it was the airframe performing the maneuver rather without gyro intervention. Basically.
And what we can do here actually is we can set up a flight mode channel. I have it set up already since I had this model set up before. We can assign that, and we can have these, we can have one set of settings with the stop lock low.
That's a good idea.
And another set of settings with the defaults. And so you guys can maybe see how it stops with them higher versus lower. So you could see kind of that gyro intervention to help with the stop versus just a more natural stop.
Okay. Sounds good.
Yeah, so we'll leave, that's on flight mode 1. So we're gonna go over here real quick. Flight mode setup. We're gonna assign this channel I had already set up before.
AS3X.
So in our AS3X settings, we're gonna go to our stop release rate. So you see flight mode 2 has the defaults. Flight mode 1 has the reduced values.
Okay.
And actually, based on our last flight, we can see here what our gains ended up at when we lowered the trimmer. So the default gains are 40, 50, 60, which you can see here on the AS3X gains menu. These are like your base values. But with that trimmer where it's at right now, this is what they end up at.
Nice.
And because it's on the trimmer, if you change models or something like that, even though it's still adjustable, it's not going away. It stays the way you set it. Whereas if you had it on the knob, if you were going to fly again and you didn't capture the gains or something, you'd have to find that gain again when you fly it. And so this is a way you can still adjust it later on without having to save it.
Right. And again, just to reiterate, the gain sensitivity, it's at 0.5, and those numbers are still lower. So again, if you started off at, 1 times, like stock, you would be really low in the numbers, and it would be really hard to fine tune. So
now, if you're going really high on this and you didn't get a bounce, you might want to go back to 0.1 or to one-time multiplier. If you got bounces too quickly, like just on 3 trim clicks, then maybe you want to go down to that 0.25.
For sure. Yeah.
But all right, let's try these 2 settings, and you can show kind of hopefully visual. Sometimes it's hard to see visually when you're not feeling it yourself, but hopefully we could show what that stop lock setting does.
Sounds good. All right, so we'll start out with what we just flew. So the switch position in the middle, just showing like a snap roll or even just like a snappy maneuver. So that's more so the gyro helping with the snap.
The gyro's helping stop once you release the stick or recenter it, the gyro is doing more of the work to stop it for you.
Gotcha. All right, so we'll go ahead and switch to the flight mode with the lower stop lock rate. So this is going to be a more natural.
Yeah.
And again, it might be hard to see in the video, but whenever you take your sticks off the center, you kind of feel the airframe become more natural.
It's just like a bit more wobbly, I guess. Or I don't know if that's how you would describe it.
No, I know what you mean. It's kind of like a, again, you just feel the airframe more so than... You can see me missing my snaps.
Yeah. But for someone that's used to, for example, when you finish a roll, you do a bit of counter movement when you go past center to counter and to stop the plane yourself. If you're used to doing that, you might want your stop lock a little lower so the plane stop is more natural and you're doing more of the stopping yourself.
Gotcha.
But if you're a beginner or just not a pro at 3D like myself, you might like the stop lock higher to let the gyro kind of keep the plane straight or just stop it for you.
Gotcha.
AS3X.
And when you're lowering the stop lock setting to get a more natural stop, the benefit of this over just lowering the gain outright is when you're flying in a straight line, you still have your full gains active for turbulence. If it's a very windy day or something like that, you can still benefit from having those gains at the standard high setting that you ended up from that initial setup.
Gotcha. Yeah, I was about to say, this thing feels really good. I mean, it's just super crisp. But also at the same time, it doesn't feel like it's intervening with any maneuvers.
Right, and that's kind of the goal we're going for here with this whole setup. Just making sure you can still do 3D stuff, but also benefit from having a gyro.
Especially, and I applaud you for, figuring out this coding that makes it fly so well, because these airframes now, a lot of the 3D airframes, pretty much all of them on the market right now, they're top notch. They fly so good already.
Oh, I love this plane.
Yeah.
And I have a larger extra, and honestly, this flies so good. I mean, people say these planes don't need a gyro, and obviously that's all personal preference, but I mean, I barely fly my larger plane now.
Right.
This just flies so good. Even when it's windy, where the wind, or on a smaller plane, you would feel the wind a lot. I mean, this thing tracks so well now with the gyro.
Oh, yeah.
One thing I also want to point out is obviously these are recommendations based on what we feel is right. We have a wiki page, which we'll put in the description, that goes over what these settings do. And there's a general tuning guidance, I guess. But everything we're saying is all opinion as well. You might have different preferences, and reading through those wiki pages might help you understand what the settings do, and you can fine tune things more to what you prefer.
All right, I think we're near
You're
the end
having
of the
too much
battery.
fun.
I am having too much fun. Well, that's what's nice about the AS3X Plus and the Synapse is less time tuning, more time just having fun with the airframe.
Throttle cut on.
Nice.
Throttle cut off. Throttle cut on.
Might have to get one of these for myself, not gonna lie.
Well, you recommended it
265 is
too,
great,
so
yeah.
So yeah, that should be it, I think, for our general 3D plane tuning guidelines. I'm gonna make sure we get some of these recommendations on the wiki as well. And hopefully as we get feedback from people as well, like what they prefer and what they're trying to do, and we learn more what people want, we can have different advice based on those set of preferences. But I think overall, this should cover most of what people will want in a 3D plane.
Definitely,
because
I'm happy
the
with
default settings do kind of interfere a bit with what you would normally try to do. So this should definitely cover that, or at least make it much better than just starting off with the standard defaults.
Right on. I wish we still had more daylight because I would definitely keep flying this. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching. Hopefully this video was very informative. Thank you for taking the time to get out here and better explain what I'm doing in the gyro as far as making changes. So that helps a lot. So yeah,
just want to make sure everyone has the best experience possible with this stuff.
Definitely.
So,
yeah. Thanks guys.
Cool.
We'll see you all in the next one.